Before the show starts, drop a comment below with where you're watching from. Then sit back, relax, and get ready for some chilling stories. Camping had always been my escape. No phone service, no stress, just me, nature, and the crackling of a fire under a sky full of stars. This time I was alone. I had done solo camping trips before, but this one felt different. I had picked a secluded spot deep in the woods, miles away from the nearest town. A place I found online, where a few hikers had mentioned incredible views and total isolation. That was exactly what I wanted. I got there late in the afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to dip behind the treetops. The place was beautiful, dense trees, a quiet lake, and not another soul in sight. I set up my tent, gathered some firewood, and by nightfall, I was sitting by the fire, enjoying the peace. Around 10 p.m., I heard something. At first, it was faint, a rustling in the bushes behind my tent. Probably an animal. I had seen deer tracks on my way in, so I figured it was just a curious one checking me out. I ignored it and kept tending to the fire. Then about an hour later, I heard it again. This time it was closer, deliberate. Not the quick, nervous movement of an animal, but slow, steady footsteps. Someone, or something, was walking in the woods just beyond the reach of the firelight. I turned my flashlight toward the sound, scanning the darkness. "Hello!" I called out. My voice felt too loud, unnatural in the silent forest. No response. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe just my mind playing tricks. But a part of me knew better. I had spent enough time outdoors to know the difference between a random animal and something watching. I threw another log onto the fire, trying to shake off the unease. If someone was out there, maybe the sight of a strong fire would make them think twice about coming closer. I forced myself to relax, sipping from my water bottle and watching the flames dance. Then, just as I started to feel normal again, a whistle, soft, slow, coming from the trees. I froze. It was close, too close. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't the wind. It was human. I grabbed my flashlight again and shined it toward the sound. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the thick trees and underbrush. But I saw nothing. No movement. No eyes reflecting the light back at me. I turned the flashlight off, my heartbeat loud in my ears. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was just the wind through the trees, creating an eerie sound. Then, from the opposite side of my campsite, another whistle. This one was closer. I jumped up, grabbing the small knife I kept in my backpack. My breath was shallow, my hands sweating. I wasn't alone out here. I stood there for what felt like hours, my body tense, ears straining for any sign of movement. But the forest was silent again. No more rustling. No more whistling. Eventually, I forced myself to get inside the tent. I zipped it up, knife still clutched in my hand. Maybe whoever it was had moved on. Maybe it was just some weird coincidence. I lay there listening. Nothing. Minutes passed. Then an hour. And then, a sound that made my blood run cold. Right outside my tent. Breathing. Slow. Deep. Just inches away from the thin layer of fabric separating me from whatever was out there. I held my breath, my grip tightening around the knife. My mind screamed at me to do something, to burst out of the tent, to run, but I was frozen. Then softly, a whisper. "You shouldn't be here." The voice was so close I could feel the vibrations in my chest. And then, silence. I stayed like that for what felt like forever, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. No footsteps. No rustling. No breathing. Eventually, I built up the courage to unzip the tent just an inch, peeking outside. The fire had burned low, casting weak embers across the ground. The trees swayed gently in the wind. Everything looked normal. But something was wrong. The rocks around my fire pit, ones I had carefully placed in a perfect circle, were rearranged. Now they formed a pattern, a symbol, a warning. I didn't waste another second. I grabbed my backpack, my keys, and ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I threw my gear into the back seat, locked the doors, and peeled out of there, gravel flying beneath my tires. I didn't look back. When I got home, I spent hours searching online, trying to find the meaning of that symbol. It took me a while, but I eventually found something similar in an old forum. It was an old warning sign, used by certain groups to mark places where outsiders weren't welcome. A message: leave, and never come back. I haven't been camping since. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I got home, even after locking my doors and double-checking every window, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. That whatever had whispered outside my tent hadn't really left. For days, I kept thinking back to that night, to the footsteps, the whistling, the breathing, to the symbol. I wasn't sure what terrified me more, the fact that someone had been out there with me, or the idea that they had left that message behind. I tried convincing myself it was just some locals messing with me. Maybe they didn't like outsiders camping in their woods. Maybe it was a stupid prank. But then, 3 days later, something happened that made me realize it wasn't over. I came home from work late, exhausted, just wanting to crash. But as I stepped up to my front door, I noticed something on my porch. A small pile of rocks, arranged in the exact same pattern as the one at my campsite. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. I hadn't told anyone about what happened. Not my friends, not my family. No one. So how did this symbol end up on my porch? I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe I was overthinking it. Then I noticed something else. My front door. It was unlocked. I knew I had locked it that morning. I stood there for a long time, debating whether to go inside. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to call someone, but I had to know. Slowly, I pushed the door open. The house was dark, silent. I stepped inside, flipping on the light. Nothing looked out of place. My furniture was the same. My kitchen was untouched. Everything seemed normal. But it wasn't. I could feel it. That same suffocating feeling from the woods. That heavy, pressing sensation of being watched. I checked every room, every closet, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. But just as I was about to convince myself I was being paranoid, I saw it, on my bedroom wall. A single word, written in dirt. Listen. I ran. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember locking the door. I just remember getting in my car and driving as fast as I could. I stayed with a friend that night. I didn't tell them everything, just that someone had broken in, that I didn't feel safe. The next day I went back. The dirt on the wall was gone. The rocks on my porch were gone. But I knew what I had seen. I moved out a week later. I didn't tell anyone the real reason. I just packed my things and left. It's been a year now, and I still don't have answers. I don't know who, or what, was in those woods that night. I don't know how they followed me home. I don't know why they left that message. But sometimes late at night, when everything is silent, I swear I can still hear it. That same slow, deliberate whistle, coming from the trees. I've always loved camping. The fresh air, the crackling of a fire, the escape from the constant noise of the world. But after what happened last summer, I don't think I'll ever go again. It was supposed to be a girls' trip. Me, my best friend Lily, and her cousin Amber. We planned everything weeks in advance, found a quiet camping spot near a river, packed enough supplies for 3 days, and hit the road on a Friday afternoon. The first night was perfect. We set up camp, made s'mores, and stayed up late talking under the stars. The only strange thing was how empty the campground was. It was peak summer, yet every other campsite around us was vacant. We joked that we had the whole forest to ourselves. That joke stopped being funny the next night. We had just finished eating dinner when we heard it for the first time. A woman's laughter. Faint. Distant. Setting up camp somewhere deeper in the woods. But as we listened, something about the laughter felt wrong. It didn't sound like a group of people. It sounded like one person, laughing, alone. And it wasn't happy laughter. It was slow, uneven, almost like she was struggling to breathe between the giggles. Amber shuddered. That's creepy as hell. Lily tried to shake it off. Probably just someone drunk messing around. We tried to ignore it. But as the night went on, the laughter kept coming. Sometimes closer, sometimes farther away. And then around midnight it stopped. Completely. The sudden silence felt worse than the laughter itself. I was exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. I kept expecting to hear it again. But instead, I heard something else. Rustling. Soft footsteps circling our tent. I held my breath, my heart slamming against my ribs. Through the thin fabric of the tent, I could see faint movement. Someone or something was outside. Lily whispered, "Do you see that?" I nodded, barely breathing. Amber, the bravest of us, slowly unzipped the tent just an inch and peeked outside. Then she gasped and yanked it shut. "What?" I whispered. Her voice shook. "There's someone standing in the trees." My stomach turned to ice. "What do you mean, someone?" Amber's breathing was ragged. "It's a woman, just standing there, not moving." Lily grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight, aiming it through the tent fabric. Bad idea. The second the light hit the trees, the laughter came back, but this time it was right outside our tent. I clapped my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut. It was so loud, so unnatural, like someone gasping for air between choking sobs. And then, it stopped. The forest went completely silent. We didn't dare move. For what felt like hours, we just sat there, waiting for something to happen. Then finally, a single whisper, right outside the tent. "Can I come in?" I've never heard a voice like that before. It wasn't playful or curious. It was desperate. Lily snapped. She grabbed the knife from her bag, unzipped the tent, and lunged outside, shining the flashlight in every direction. Nothing. No woman. No footsteps. Just empty forest. But right at the edge of our campsite, carved into a tree, a smiley face, carved deep, dripping with something dark. We left everything behind. The tent, the food, all of it. We ran to the car, locked the doors, and drove for hours, not stopping until we saw the lights of a gas station. We never reported it, never told our families what really happened. But sometimes late at night, I think about that whisper, and I wonder, what would have happened if we had answered? I barely slept after that night. Even after we were back home, safe, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had escaped something wrong. For days, I replayed it in my head. The laughter, the shadow outside our tent, the whisper, the carved smiley face. None of it made sense. A few nights later, Lily called me. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice tight. She sent me a link to a local news article. Missing campers found in state forest. Investigation ongoing. I felt sick as I read. 2 hikers, a couple, had gone missing a week before our trip. Their bodies had been found near a remote campsite, deep in the woods. No clear signs of what happened to them. No suspects. Just gone. But that wasn't the worst part. The article included a picture of a tree from the crime scene. Carved into the bark. A smiley face. Exactly like the one we saw. Lily and I stared at the picture, neither of us saying a word. We didn't need to. We knew what it meant. "We need to call someone," I finally said. "Tell them what we saw." Lily hesitated. "Tell them what?" "That we heard some creepy laughter and ran away. We don't have proof." I wanted to argue, but she was right. The police wouldn't take us seriously. That night, I locked every door and window before going to bed. I checked twice, 3 times. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., I woke up. Something was off. The air in my room felt wrong, heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest. And then, a noise. Faint. Outside my window. At first, I thought it was the wind, but as I listened, my blood ran cold. Laughter. Slow. Breathless. My entire body went rigid. I lived on the 2nd floor. There was no way someone could be outside my window. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the sheets. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was still dreaming. Then softly, 3 knocks against the glass. I couldn't breathe. I didn't move. I didn't look. Then a whisper. "Can I come in?" Tears burned in my eyes. My body refused to move, refused to acknowledge what was happening. I don't know how long I lay there, frozen. At some point, the sound stopped. Morning came. When I finally got the courage to check my window, there was nothing there. No handprints. No footprints. Nothing. I wanted to believe it was a nightmare. But when I checked my phone, there was a text from Lily. I heard it too. We never talked about it again. Amber stopped answering our calls. None of us ever went camping again. But sometimes late at night, when the world is silent, I swear I can still hear it. That awful, breathless laughter. I've done a lot of solo camping. People always tell me it's dangerous, but I find it peaceful. You just have to be smart, know your surroundings, keep track of landmarks, and never take unnecessary risks. But last summer, I learned that no matter how careful you are, you're never really alone. I had taken a week off work and decided to spend 3 nights camping in a remote area of a national forest. No designated campsites, just miles of dense trees and winding trails. I had done it before and never had any issues. The first day went as planned. I hiked deep into the woods, set up camp near a quiet stream, and spent the evening by the fire, listening to the sounds of nature. No stress, no distractions, just me and the wilderness. But as I was getting ready to turn in for the night, something caught my eye. About 30 feet away, in the dim light of my fire, I saw footprints in the dirt. Not mine. I frowned and stepped closer. The prints were fresh, boot prints, large ones, and they led straight to my campsite. A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't seen a single person all day. I shined my flashlight around, scanning the dark tree-line. "Hello," I called. My voice felt too loud in the empty forest. No response. I told myself it was probably an old trail, maybe from another hiker earlier in the week. I tried to ignore the unease creeping into my stomach and went inside my tent. I barely slept. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made my pulse spike. But eventually exhaustion won, and I drifted off. Then at some point in the night, I woke up. Something had moved outside my tent. I held my breath, listening. The fire had burned down, leaving only faint embers. The forest was dead silent. Then, a soft crunch, a footstep, close. I stayed completely still, heart hammering in my chest. Someone was out there. I reached for my flashlight with trembling fingers, but I didn't turn it on yet. I needed to be sure. Another step, closer this time. Then it stopped. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. I gripped my flashlight tighter, took a deep breath, and flicked it on. I aimed the beam straight at the tent wall, hoping to catch a shadow, any movement. But there was nothing, just my own ragged breathing and the distant rustling of trees in the wind. I swallowed hard. Was I imagining things? Slowly, I unzipped the tent just an inch and peeked outside. Nothing. Just the dim outline of my extinguished fire pit and the trees beyond. I stayed awake the rest of the night, listening, waiting. But nothing else happened. By morning, I had almost convinced myself it was just a deer or some other animal passing through. But then I stepped outside and saw the footprints. They weren't where they had been last night. Now they circled my tent. Whoever had been out there, they had been watching me. I packed up my gear in record time. I didn't care if I had planned to stay 2 more nights. I wasn't spending another second in that forest. As I hiked back toward my car, I kept looking over my shoulder, scanning the trees. The footprints around my tent had been too close, too deliberate. Not some lost hiker passing through. Someone had stood there, watching me sleep. I moved fast, following the same route I had taken the day before. But after about an hour, something felt wrong. The trail didn't look the same. I stopped, taking a deep breath. I had been hiking and camping for years. I knew how easy it was to get turned around, but I had marked my route on my GPS before setting out. I pulled out my phone, but of course no signal. Still, I had the offline map. I opened it, expecting to see my location moving toward the trailhead. But the little blue dot wasn't where it should be. I wasn't on the trail anymore. A knot formed in my stomach. Had I made a wrong turn? I hadn't seen any forks in the path. I turned around to retrace my steps. And that's when I saw it. Another set of footprints. Not mine. And they were fresh. My mouth went dry. The prints led from the trees and stopped right behind where I had just been standing. Like someone had been following me. Watching me. A wave of cold panic shot through me. I looked around, trying to spot movement in the trees. Nothing. But I felt it. Someone was out there. I had two choices: keep trying to find my way back to the trail, or stay put and hope I wasn't actually being followed. I chose the first. I started moving again, this time faster. I kept checking my map, trying to get myself back on track. Then, about 20 minutes later, I found something that made my stomach drop. My own campsite. I had gone in a circle. That was impossible. I had walked in a straight line. I had been following the map. Someone had led me back here. A rustling sound came from the trees to my left. I whipped around, flashlight up, and for the first time I saw him. A man, half hidden behind a tree. Tall, skinny, filthy. His clothes were ragged, his face smeared with dirt. He was just standing there, staring at me. And in his hand, my knife. The one I had packed with my gear. The one that should have been in my bag. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just ran. Branches tore at my arms, my legs. My lungs burned. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I just kept going, pushing forward, praying I was heading in the right direction. Then, a break in the trees. The road. My car. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip them. I threw myself inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I peeled out onto the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The man was standing at the treeline, still watching, still holding my knife. I never reported it. What would I even say? That some stranger had stalked me in the woods? That he had stolen my knife without me noticing? That he had led me in circles right back to my tent? No one would believe me. But I know one thing. I wasn't lost. He made sure I wouldn't leave. And if I hadn't run when I did, I don't think I ever would have.